Elvis's car broke down on a Memphis street in 1968. He sat at a bus stop next to an old woman who didn't know him while he waited for help. She told him about her life. Elvis didn't do anything. At the end, she told him, "Son, you listen well." He answered in a way that made her cry. "You're the most beautiful song I've ever heard." This is the story of being nobody and hearing everything. The evening was warm. In May 1968. Elvis had driven one of his cars by himself. He did this sometimes to feel normal when being Elvis Presley got too much for him to handle. Near downtown Memphis, the car began to make strange noises. There was smoke coming from under the hood when Elvis pulled over. He used a pay phone to call his friends. In the evening, it would take at least 45 minutes for someone to get there. Elvis took a look. He had on sunglasses, a plain shirt, and normal shoes. Pants. Not a single thing that screamed Elvis Presley. Nearby, there was a bus stop bench where an old black woman was sitting and fanning herself with a church notice. Along with his sunglasses on, Elvis sat down on the other end of the bench and waited. The woman gave him a quick look, nodded, and then went back to fanning herself. He wasn't known to her. Elvis wasn't with anyone at a bus stop for the first time in years. It felt great. "Hot evening," the woman said after a short pause. "Yes, ma'am. It is. The bus is running late. Always does on Thursdays. Don't know why Thursdays are special, but they are." Elvis smiled. "How long have you been waiting?" "About 20 minutes. But I don't mind. Gives me time to think. Time to rest these old bones before I get home and start dinner." After a short pause, the woman spoke again, this time to herself rather than Elvis. She said, "I'm 73 years old and still take the bus. I never learned to drive. My William promised to teach me, but he died before we could do it." Elvis said, "I'm sorry." "Oh, don't be sorry, son. That was 15 years ago. I've made peace with it, though. I do talk to him sometimes when I'm writing." Elvis didn't say anything, but he kept listening. Maybe it was because he seemed interested, or maybe it was because she was tired and needed to talk, but Mrs. Lillian Davis began to tell the stranger at the bus stop her life story. She talked about how she met William at a church social when she was 17 and how they became engaged. About how they got married with nothing but love and hope. "We didn't have 2 nickels to rub together, but Lord, we were happy," Mrs. Davis said. "William worked at the lumberyard and I cleaned houses. We saved every penny we could. It took us 12 years, but we finally bought a little house with just 2 bedrooms. It was ours. It was our piece of the American dream." She told Elvis about their 3 kids and how proud she was to watch them grow up. Mrs. Davis said that being poor made her appreciate every little accomplishment, like her daughter becoming a teacher and her sons getting good jobs and buying their own homes. "Her grandchildren are going to college, which is hard for me to believe because my grandparents picked cotton." Elvis listened, nodded, and asked her a gentle question now and then to get her to talk more. She told him about William's death and how lonely it was to lose your partner after 51 years. She talked about having to learn how to cook for one, sleep in an empty bed, and make decisions without asking William, "What do you think?" Mrs. Davis said that some people say it gets better. It might, but it also changes. You learn how to carry the piece that's missing. You learn that love doesn't end when life does. She told him about her church and how she sang in the choir every Sunday. She also said that music was what kept her going after William died. "It's fun to sing with other people. It makes you feel like you're not alone," she said. "We're all just trying to make it through life. And music lets each other know we get it." Elvis could feel tears in his glasses. This woman was telling him everything that he had spent his whole life trying to say through his songs. That basic need to connect with others, to understand, to not be alone. "You sing?" Mrs. Davis asked. Elvis said in a low voice, "A little bit." "Sing more. The world needs more people who want to make songs. Even if you're just humming while you do the dishes, music can help you get through the tough parts." Mrs. Davis talked about her garden, her neighbors, her daily life, small pleasures like a call from a grandchild, a good lecture, fresh tomatoes from her garden, and how grief never goes away but changes you enough to live with it. Elvis didn't talk over the other person, tell him he was popular, or change the subject to himself. He just listened, which is something people don't do very often these days because everything is always in a hurry. Mrs. Davis said, "You know what's funny? I've been talking your ear off and I don't even know your name." Elvis thought for a moment. "I'm Elvis then. Elvis is a nice name. Not often heard. This is Lillian. Louise Davis." "Hi, Mrs. Davis. It's nice to meet you." "Thanks, Elvis. You listen well. That doesn't happen often. Lots of people, mostly young people, are always waiting their turn to speak. You did listen, though. Paid attention. That's how my William was. He would just listen as I talked about how I felt. That made things better in some way. You make me think of him a little." He could feel his throat getting tight. "That was one of the nicest things someone ever said to me. A very long time." "Yes, it's true. You have a nice face. I can tell the difference between nice and mean people even when they wear sunglasses." "Yes, you do." A bus pulled up to the stop from down the street. Mrs. Davis put her things together. "A purse that is pretty worn out and a canvas bag full of veggies. That's my bus. Elvis, it was great to talk to you. You made the time of an old woman wait go by." Elvis helped her stand up. "Before you leave, Mrs. Davis, may I say something?" "Yes, son." Elvis took his glasses off. "Your story about your life, your love, your family, and your losses is the most beautiful song I've ever heard, and I've heard a lot of them." Mrs. Davis looked at him more. "Look closely at his face now that he doesn't have sunglasses on." Her eyes got bigger. "Lord have mercy. You're the king of rock and roll. This is the real Elvis." "Yes, ma'am. I really did say that. I've never heard a song more beautiful or important than yours. Thanks for letting me know about it." Mrs. Davis's eyes full of tears. "I filled your ears with stories about my everyday life. I forgot that I was talking to you. Mrs. Davis, I'm just a person. The same as you. It's not like everyone else's life. When you really listen, no life is normal. Everyone is a song. You look lovely." The bus pulled up, and the doors opened. Mrs. Davis wasn't sure if she should get on the bus or stay to talk to this famous man who had just told her she was a song. She said, "I have to go." "Can I hug you, Elvis?" he asked. "That would be great," she said, giving him a tight hug. This elderly woman and this superstar, just two people at a bus stop who'd shared something real. "Thank you for listening," she said. "Thank you for making me feel like my story was important. It is more important than you think." Mrs. Davis paid her fare, got on the bus, and sat down by the window. She turned around to see Elvis still standing at the stop as the bus drove off. He made a sign. She smiled and cried as she waved back. After 15 minutes, Elvis's people came back with a new car and found him still sitting at the bus stop, looking thoughtful. "Boss, you okay?" "Joey?" he asked Esposito. "Better than okay. I just had the best conversation I've had in years." "With who?" "With a woman named Lillian Davis. She shared her life story. For the most part, they didn't know who I was. I was just someone they could talk to." "What did you talk about?" "Everything important. Things like love, loss, family, and getting through tough times. Why music is good. How we all just want to avoid being alone." She told him, "I was a good listener." Joe looked at Elvis and saw something in his face that hadn't been there in a while, peace and clarity. She was right. Elvis got up from the bus stop bench and said, "Joe, you know what I realized? I spend all my time trying to be heard, making sure my voice, my songs, my Joe said it wasn't often that he just listened to someone else's story without thinking about what to say or how it related to his own. Mrs. Davis's life has been harder than mine in most ways, less money, less comfort, and more loss, but she's okay with that. She's thankful. She finds joy in tomatoes from her garden and phone calls from her grandchildren. And you know what? Because it was true, her story moved me more than any song I've heard in years. Elvis got in the new car, but he didn't start driving right away. "I want to do something," he said. "I want to find Mrs. Davis's house and make sure she's taken care of. Not in a charitable way, but in a thank you for reminding me of what's real way." Over the next few weeks, Elvis had his people help Mrs. Davis in a quiet way. They made sure her house didn't need any repairs, set up a trust fund for her grandchildren's college, and delivered groceries. They did all of this without her knowing, so she wouldn't feel like a charity case. But Elvis also did something more personal. He wrote her a letter. "Dear Mrs. Davis, you probably don't remember me," the young man. "But I remember you and everything you said. Our conversation changed me. I make music for a living, but you reminded me that the most beautiful music isn't what's played on stages or recorded in studios. It's the music of a life lived with love, courage, and grace. Your life is that kind of music. Thank you for sharing your song with me. Thank you for seeing me as Elvis and not Elvis Presley. Thank you for reminding me of what's important." Elvis's mother, Mrs. Lillian Davis, kept that letter until she died at age 90 in 1985. Her daughter found it in a Bible that had been carefully kept. At Mrs. Davis's funeral, her daughter read the letter out loud, and everyone in the church hugged her. "My mother talked about that bus stop conversation for the rest of her life," her daughter said. "Someone famous told her that her everyday life was a beautiful song. She thought, if that famous person thought my everyday life was worth listening to, then maybe all of our everyday lives are worth more than we think." The story of Elvis and Mrs. Davis went around Memphis and then the world. It was used as an example to talk about fame, privacy, and how important it is to really listen to other people. "Elvis at the bus stop reminds us of something," said a professor of communication. "Everyone has a story," said Dr. Sarah Chin. "Listening is a choice that people with Elvis's fame make all the time. It tells us that ordinary lives can be extraordinary if we pay attention to them." Other famous people were affected by the story. Many people said it helped them stay grounded, remember that success doesn't make their stories more important than anyone else's, and listen more than they talk. Singer John Legend said, "The bus stop story changed how I talk to people." When you show respect for someone, you listen to them, not talk about yourself. You show respect by being interested in their story. That's something popular people should learn. People who had never thought their lives were interesting or important could also relate to the story. Someone wrote, "If Elvis Presley thought a woman's life was interesting to hear, then maybe my life is interesting to tell." There may be songs in all of us. The story of Mrs. Davis came to represent something bigger. That getting louder or more interesting isn't the answer to loneliness and feeling cut off. It sounds better now. It means listening to someone else's story instead of always trying to tell your own. The spot where the bus stop used to be has been marked with a small historical sign. It says, "Hey, Elvis Presley sat here in May 1968. Person at a bus stop and heard a woman named Lillian Davis talk about her life. He said, she was the most beautiful song I've ever heard." This moment reminds us that every life is a song worth hearing. The marker has become a place where people come to pray. People sit in that corner and think about the things we don't hear because we're too busy to pay attention. Some folks take their own senior loved ones, sit with them, and hear their stories for the first time. "I used to get bored with my grandmother's stories," one young woman wrote after seeing the site. "After that, I read about Elvis and Mrs. Davis. I asked my grandmother to talk about her life. Tell me the truth. I paid attention. Paid attention. What do you know? Elvis was right. Her life was a lovely song. I almost missed it because I was glued to my phone, my life and things I own. Not any longer." The meeting at the bus stop was one of Elvis's favorite memories up until the day he died. When people asked him what moment meant the most to him, he'd tell them about it. Not the big hits, the movies, the awards, or the shows that sell out in minutes. Just a bus stop, an old woman, and 30 minutes of listening, being no one to someone, and hearing the beautiful song of an ordinary, extraordinary life. During that half hour at the bus stop, Elvis told his spiritual guide Larry Geller, "Tell me why I sing in the first place. I sing to connect with other people and make them feel less alone. But Davis misses she knew that without my singing. Just someone to listen to her. When I really heard her story, I felt closer to other people than I had in years." Elvis went on, "We think we should always be interesting, always be talking, and always be performing. But sometimes the most important thing is to just be ourselves. We should just be quiet and listen, because everyone has a song inside them. Most of them never get to sing it because no one is there to hear it." Like all lives, Mrs. Davis's was just another day in the life. She did a lot of work. She loved very much. She lost friends and family. She didn't stop. Small things made her happy. She sang in the band at her church. His attention made her song heard, though Elvis really heard it. She felt important and heard, so she was happy. She thought her life was important. She felt like someone saw her. In other words, hearing does that. It tells people, you matter. Your story matters. Your life is worth my time and attention. Elvis Presley could have ignored an old woman at a bus stop, but he chose to listen. He gave her a gift when he chose to listen. More important than money or fame. The chance to be heard. She also gave him a gift. To remember that songs without tunes are sometimes the most beautiful. Sometimes they're just the accounts of how someone lived, loved, and made it through life. The two people at the bus stop were both changed by what they heard and said. What a difference it makes to really hear someone. That's what it means to treat everyone like they're a good song, so you should listen to it. The song Mrs. Davis was lovely. Elvis knew because he paid attention. He heard things that most of us miss when we listen. That everyday lives are never really everyday. Their music is a mix of love, loss, bravery, and grace. You only need to stop for a short time to hear them. This is a story about listening, making connections, and finding. If you found beauty in everyday life, please join and share it. Whose story should you really pay attention to? Share your thoughts below.